All right, guys. So we've talked about the Stone Ages. We've talked about how people move from place to place. Now, the idea of out of Africa theory is the idea that people leave Africa and settle everywhere else. But when we're looking at the Fertile Crescent and the cradle of civilization, we need to look at first Africa and then Asia. So when we're looking at our first big civilized area with farms and with everything, we're looking at 5 different civilizations within that area, and one of them is along the Nile River right here in Africa. But once we leave Africa and the Nile River, we start Asia literally right here. This is going to be the beginning of the Middle East, and so we've got 2 civilizations along the Mediterranean, and we've got 2 in between these 2 rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. Within this, we're going to have mainly polytheistic civilizations, which means polytheistic is the multiple gods. They are going to believe in many, many different gods. They aren't going to have one specific. Even the Egyptians are going to have many different gods that they follow, even though Ra is going to be the biggest one. It's not the only one. So if we keep moving northeast, we've got the Hebrews in the south along the Mediterranean, and then we've got the Phoenicians in the north. Now, the Hebrews are it's a type of religion. It's Judaism or Jewish. But at this time in history that we're talking about a civilization of these monotheistic, the only monotheistic group, one God. And they are going to be the starting point for monotheistic religions going forward. Most monotheistic religions today that are still around come from the Hebrews. The Phoenicians, which is northern Mediterranean along this area, we have to remember that they are a trading civilization. They are going to have colonies all the way around the Mediterranean, and they are going to trade with everybody. They don't have a preference. They're not going to be anti anybody. They're going to go where the money is. And then we keep moving northeast, east, whatever you want to call it. And then we've got the Euphrates on the south and the Tigris in the north. And how I remember that is E-T. It's alphabetical. E comes before T. In this area, it's south near the Persian Gulf. This is the Persian Gulf. We've got the Sumerians and their major city right here of Ur. And then in this north, we've got the Babylonians. Now, these 2 civilizations right here, the Babylonians and the Sumerians, are going to always fight each other. They're fighting for that main city right here. That's Ur. When the Babylonians win it, they're going to rename it, and they're super duper unique in their name. They're going to call it Babylon. If you look at the word Babylonians, Babylon's the first part. And they're going to continue to fight over that area for hundreds of years until both civilizations actually are going to collapse. And the way that the Babylonians do win that area is by a guy named Hammurabi. Now, Hammurabi comes up with one of the harshest law codes that we've ever seen. If you've ever heard of the phrase an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, it comes from Hammurabi. This is important when we're looking at the rest of his laws and how he kept such control of that area. And that was because if you did anything, you would either lose a hand, a foot, or you would lose your life. A son who hit a father would lose, the son would lose his hand. A construction worker's house that fell on the owner of the house would lose his life. The construction worker would die. Now, how do we know all about this? We know about this because of 3 different types of writing. We've got our hieroglyphics in Egypt. Those, think of modern day emojis. In Sumer, we have the first use of lines, shapes and lines. And then the Phoenicians, because they needed to speak with so many different groups, they created their own type of writing called the alphabet. Each of these, unless they were right next to each other like these 2 and these 2, they were completely isolated. It would take months to get from place to place. So they didn't actually know that they were all polytheistic until later on. Remember that the Hebrews were the only group that were monotheistic. But within the other groups, how did we pass down the rule from one family to another, or one family member? And that's based on heredity, bloodlines. Usually it'd be father to son, but every once in a while it would be father to daughter, because the daughter, after the father died, would take control and wouldn't allow other people to rule in her stead. And that was really big in Egypt. And when we're talking about Egypt, we're talking about northeast Africa along this Nile River. Now, this is one of the longest rivers in the world. But the big thing about the Nile River was that it flowed opposite. So most rivers are going to flow from north to south. Now, the Nile River, oddly, is going to flow from south to north. And that's super important when you look at where the cities are going to be located. Now, the big cities are going to be in Upper Egypt, which is the southern portion, because that's where the river was. And the northern portion is going to be called the Lower Egypt, and it's going to have the delta. The Nile Delta is going to flood pretty drastically every year. And that's important because of the fertile land. We need to remember that the fertile land within the Fertile Crescent is going to change how you farm. And if we go back, we can look at a crescent is going to be a moon shape, a banana shape, the top of your thumb shape, however you want to look at it. And it's called fertile because of how the soil was. It's also called the cradle of civilization. Now, these two names mean that civilizations start right here, and England is the weird one, but the rest of them, everything else starts in this area. So when we look at Egypt, we have to remember that the pharaohs, who are going to be in charge of both the religion and the government, pretend that the pharaoh is God on earth, because that's how they saw themselves. And when they did that, they created something called a theocracy. Now, a theocracy, anything with cracy is going to be a type of government. Theo means a mix. It's religion and government together. And when they live along this river, remember, it's going to flood every year. It's going to be some type of predictable flooding every single year. So they're going to create the first calendar. If I know about what day every year that the rains are going to start, I can go forward with everything and tell you exactly when to have your family away from the river, when to have your harvest pulled in. And they're going to look at the river, they're going to look at rain, they're going to look at the stars. They're also going to know during the dry season that they need to create an irrigation system. This is going to be wells, this is going to be buckets, it's going to be little divots in between their crops, so that when there's no rain in the forecast, their forecast, they can still get water to all of their crops and be able to feed everybody. And they're going to create some type of writing. And remember, these are called hieroglyphics. Now, we think of them, or I think of them, as modern day emojis. I could ask you guys to create a story based on the emojis that are in your phone right now, and you would be able to do that. And that's what the Egyptians are going to do as well. They're also going to be, just like the other three of the others, they're going to be polytheistic. They have many different gods. And when they're building their pyramids in Upper Egypt in the south, they're going to dedicate those to not only their own tomb, that's where they're going to be buried as a pharaoh, but they're also going to have them as a place to honor the gods, so that the rains will come predictably, that they'll have a good harvest, and all of those pieces. Now, the Hebrews are the only oddball in this time period because they're monotheistic. This is called a Star of David, and this is their symbol. Most religions are going to have a symbol. So you're either going to see this Star of David, or you're going to see this right here. Now, this right here is a depiction or a picture of their holy book or their sacred writing. That's a Torah. Now, they do have multiple names. The Jews and Judaism are the two of the other ones. They're going to live south of the Phoenicians along the Mediterranean. And they're going to be mainly focused on the Jordan River, which is important today when we think about Israel, Now, if you pay attention to news at all, and I'm hoping that you do, you know that Palestine and Israel are having a lot of issues, and it's mainly because the Jews want a home base, and they've been kicked out of so many different areas. Now, for the Hebrews, their story is pretty cool. They are founded by a man named Abram. Now, I know it says Abraham. The story goes that Abram was an oddball, and he heard this voice, and this voice is going to tell him that he can be more than just a man with a monotheistic belief, because he is so against the polytheism of his time period, and he is going to earn the name Abraham because he is going to eventually become the father of many. And when he does that, he has to leave his home, and he has to basically let go of everything he's known. And God promises him that he will have as many children as there are stars. And so Abraham is going to take his family and leave his city of Canaan. And they are going to be based in the city of Jerusalem. This is a modern day name for the city. When they are moving around, they've been kicked out of their homes, they're leaving the area around the Jordan River, and they're going to find refuge in Egypt, which is important, and they're going to stay in Egypt for a really long time. They've been exiled out of their homeland because of fear. Remember, they're monotheistic where everybody else is polytheistic, so they're not like everybody else. They're going to eventually end up in Egypt, and they're going to find a lot of, they're going to be welcomed, and they're going to find a way to live their lives to the fullest, and they're going to find friends there, and they're going to become friends with some of the pharaohs because they are so good at being peaceful. And unfortunately, what happens is that one pharaoh, his wife, is so afraid of the power that the Hebrews have over the pharaoh that she says, and she finds the seer or the religious person, and they come up with this idea to say that the Jews have to be enslaved in Egypt because they have too much power. Now, that's hard for us to believe today. However, at that time, the Pharaoh's going to listen to his priests because they are the direct connection to the gods. Even though the Pharaoh is God on earth, the priests are going to be the ones that talk more often with the gods. And the gods, according to this Pharaoh's wife, says that the Hebrews have too much power and they must be enslaved. And so they're enslaved. For a couple hundred years, they're enslaved in Egypt until a story comes out. Another priest it's a new Pharaoh, it's a new time period. It's a couple hundred years later, and the Pharaoh is visited by his priest, and his priest informs him that the firstborn son of a Jewish slave is going to be the death of his reign. His family rule is going to be taken down. This is important because now that Pharaoh is going to order the firstborn sons of every single Jewish slave to be killed. Now, as a mother, I'm going to say that I'm going to do everything in my power to protect my children. And so one mother in particular realizes what's happening, and she takes her son to the Nile River. They're in Egypt, so she's gonna go to the river. She's going to find a basket, and she's going to send her son down the river. A few hundred feet down the river, though, the princess, the Pharaoh's daughter, is waiting and cleaning the clothes in the Nile. Maybe she's just swimming. The stories differ a little bit. But she finds this crying infant, and that's sad. So she brings this infant home, not knowing that this infant is a Jewish boy. And so she has to make sure that her father will take him in. And he does, because nobody realizes that this young infant, this male infant, is going to lead to anything bad. So this infant is going to then be raised with the Pharaoh's daughter as his mom and the Pharaoh's son. And the Pharaoh's son they're going to live together forever, not forever. They're going to live together until they're adults. And the new Pharaoh, the son, comes to power. And they're walking around Egypt. And this young infant boy that came down, his name is Moses. And Moses is walking with his adopted brother down in Egypt. And there's a lot of work being done. Unfortunately, Moses sees some Jewish men being whipped by some Egyptian guards. And he says, "Stop that." And the Egyptian guard says, "No." And there's a fight that happens, and the Egyptian guard is pushed off of a very tall tower or bridge and is killed. Now, any Egyptian that is killed, that's automatic death for the person who does the killing. Well, Moses is scared, so he leaves Egypt out of fear. And instead of hiding forever, he hears this voice. And this voice says to go back to Egypt. He realizes when Moses leaves Egypt in fear, he realizes that he's actually a Jew. He's part of these enslaved humans in Egypt. So he's got to go back. And this voice in his head says, "You must go back and free your people." And so he does. And he goes to see his brother, his adopted brother, who they grew up together. They should know everything about each other. And Moses is going to say, "Let my people go free." And the Pharaoh says, "No." Well, okay, well, then we have the 10 plagues of Egypt. Moses says, "You either let my people go free, or God will send these plagues down upon you." And no, that's not what's going to happen. The Pharaoh says, "Absolutely not. They are my slaves. I will keep them." Well, Moses tells the Jews to paint blood over their doors. And the plagues come, passing over the Jewish homes. Eventually, the Pharaoh decides, "Okay, you can go. Take these plagues, get out of here, go, be gone." And so Moses takes his people, and he's going to go east with his people. And he's going to come to the Red Sea. And unfortunately, they hear in the distance that the Egyptian guards are coming after them. So what does Moses do? He looks to the sky and he says, "God, help me." And so Moses, with the word of God in his head, he is brought to the edge of the Red Sea, and he parts the Red Sea, allowing the Jewish people to be free from the Egyptians. Again, the Jews are going to be exiled out of their homeland because they've been there for hundreds of years again. But now they are free, so they're going to wander around, they're going to travel around the desert for 40 years. Within that time period, Moses and his people are going to find Mount Sinai, and Moses is going to go up to the top, and he's going to see this burning bush, and he finally finds in writing the promises of God to the Jews. And we know them as the 10 Commandments, and they're going to be on 2 tablets, and they are going to be kept for all time. And all of these stories we know because they are written in the holy book of the Torah. And they explain the belief in one God and how this one God is all-knowing, according to the Torah and according to the Jews. And once they have that book written down, and it's being written by many different people in the Hebrew language, it's known for Christians as the Old Testament. And there is going to be that understanding that the moral code, what the laws that all Jews need to follow, are known as the 10 Commandments. And there are more pieces to the puzzle, but overall, all Jews must follow the 10 Commandments, and this will eventually be passed on to the Christians. This is the promise from God. This is the covenant from God, promising that as long as the Jews, the Hebrews, they follow these 10 Commandments, they will make it. And they will continue to find their homeland.